Well, I just put it on now and I'll try after. It looks like it's gonna take some time and it starts in 3 minutes, my Zoom. So that smells so good. Thank you, baby. Do you saw my message that there are two packages outside?
Oh, yeah.
Rebecca. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, ladies. We're going to wait one more minute, 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we will begin. Oh, Andrea, I haven't seen you in a while.
Good morning. It's so nice to be here. Hannah, could we dedicate the class to my mother today? It would have been her 100th birthday.
Wow, sure.
Her name is Zelda Bus Ariel.
Okay. Wow, beautiful.
Thank you, Hannah.
We're going to start in 1 minute. Okay, 1 second. Let me just mute everybody. Okay, so we are beginning chapter 35, which is actually the beginning, the beginning of a new topic in Tanya. Well, it's not a new topic really, but it's going back to the original topic that Tanya was actually dedicated to and that the Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya about. The very reason that Tanya was written was to explaining the statement that Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader Moshe, told the nation of Israel when he, said his words of farewell to them. He said, remember that to keep the Torah mitzvahs is actually very easy. And he didn't use the word easy, but he said it is near to you, it is accessible, it is relevant. In other words, should be easy. What are those words that he said? He said the famous pasuk Ki karev elecha hadavar ma'od b'ficha u'bilvavcha la'asosei, that the thing, which thing, meaning to fulfill the mitzvahs and to learn Torah, is very close to you in your mouth, in your heart, and to do the mitzvahs, right? La'asosei, to do the mitzvahs. Now, The Alter Rebbe did spend some time in the beginning of Tanya explaining that it is the nature, the essential nature of a Jew. And we can relate to this, especially since we've spent the last few chapters as a Benoni identifying with his godly soul, right? Because that is when you really have true joy, is when you identify with your godly soul, not with your animal soul. So it is the nature, the true nature of a Jew to serve Hashem, right? That's our essential nature, our godly soul. That's what it wants, to serve Hashem. But at times it might actually seem very difficult. Maybe majority of the time it might seem very difficult, right? And therefore we act ungodly, right? But because of the fact that when things become clear, so for example, the Alter Rebbe has mentioned previously, when a Jew is threatened by death, either death or negating Hashem, he will choose death. So that means that it became very clear to him where his loyalties lie, right? So at that moment, he's not going to act ungodly, he's going to act very godly, right? Because of this fact that this possibility occurs, and in that case, a Jew acts in accordance with the will of Hashem, and therefore we can say that his true feelings are revealed. Therefore, this pasuk makes sense that you can fulfill Torah and mitzvahs with emotion, bilvavcha. That's why it says in your heart, right? So, kikarev elecha davar me'od b'ficha. Okay, you could say whatever you want to say. It's easy to talk, right? You don't have to necessarily feel. Oh, we could also feel bilvavcha. Oh, okay. Feeling is important too, because otherwise we wouldn't be sacrificing our life for Hashem, because we love Hashem. But this chapter is now going to focus on the last of these three words, which is la'asoisoi. And the Alter Rebbe will begin discussing how doing a mitzvah is even more important than feeling the feelings that come with doing the mitzvah, and is actually essential to serving Hashem, even more so than the feelings. Not to say that we should not develop feelings of love and Hashem, but if we're going to take a lesson from this chapter, and I think you'll understand it more when we finish the chapter, is that even if you don't feel like it, do it anyways, because that is Hashem's will. So we're going to understand through learning this chapter what is so special about doing action, right? Which is even greater than the feelings that accompany the action. Now, we know that the Benoni, or when we relate to ourselves, potential Benonis, right, was not created to be a tzaddik. That is not why we were put in this world. We are not able to transform our animal soul. That's in the tzaddik, the animal soul has been completely transformed. But the Benoni protects the body from the animal soul. In other words, the Benoni does not allow the body to serve as a vehicle for the animal soul. We've mentioned before, what does it mean, a vehicle, right? The patriarchs were a vehicle to Hashem's will, meant that they didn't have a will of their own. They just went wherever Hashem wanted them to go. They just behaved in accordance with Hashem. Their bodies were a vehicle towards Hashem. And a Benoni can also make his body not be a vehicle to the animal soul, because many times when we sin or we do things contrary to Hashem's will for our own comfort, for our own pleasure, we're at that point, at that moment, our bodies are not being a vehicle to Hashem's will. They're acting contrary to Hashem's will. So the purpose of creation is really to reveal godliness. And we can call this the Shekhinah. So now the Alter Rebbe goes into a whole discussion and he says, let's speak about the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is revealed godliness, and it usually rests above our heads. Now this is very interesting, because why above our heads? Well, it's also the reason why men wear a yarmulke. And women have this more innate connection to the Shekhinah, right? To remind them of the Shekhinah. But why above our heads? So it's almost like a candle. It's like the flame, indeed, of a candle. and our bodies are the wick of this candle. And usually a candle needs oil in order to burn, right? Wax, the oil in order to burn. So the body is the wick, and the oil are the mitzvahs that we do. Now, they're not that Tanya does not tell us that they're the emotions of love and fear of Hashem. It's the actual actions, the actual acts of a mitzvah that are the fuel for the flame of the Shekhinah. So if we want to keep connected to this divine presence, which is constantly above our heads, we have to fuel it with oil, which is the mitzvah. So now the whole question is, which the Alter Rebbe asks and answers, is why doesn't the neshama fuel the Shekhinah? Isn't the neshama, especially the divine soul, one would think that the neshama, which is something spiritual, would be able to bridge the gap between our coarse body and the holy Shekhinah? Why is it the mitzvahs specifically, right? And the answer is that is as holy as a neshama is, and a neshama is a chelek eloka mimal. It is a part of Hashem. The neshama is a creation. It is not nullified to Hashem. It is a separate entity. Just like all of creation was created via tzimtzum, the contraction of Hashem's light, so that we should actually feel like we're independent beings, and all of creation looks like it's independent of Hashem, and that's how the world exists, right? The neshama is also a creation, and therefore is not nullified to Hashem. It's a separate entity. It's very holy, but mitzvahs and masim tovim. So the Alter Rebbe says mitzvahs, which are the commandments of Hashem, and good deeds, meaning all the things we do for the sake of heaven, not necessarily a mitzvah, but everything we do for the sake of Hashem, are the will of Hashem, and therefore it's Hashem himself. It's not a separate entity from Hashem. So interestingly, when you do a mitzvah, you actually get elevated higher than your own neshama, because your neshama is a part of Hashem, very holy, but it comes from Hashem. It's a creation, not nullified towards Hashem. But the will of Hashem, the mitzvahs, the actions, that's pure godliness it's pure Hashem, without even going through tzimtzum. It's the will of Hashem. Now let's discuss the will of Hashem momentarily, because there are two types of will that Hashem has. Hashem has an inner ratzon and an outer ratzon, an inner will and an outer will. Now, what are the differences between innermost will and outermost will? Like, what are we talking about even, right? So when we say that Hashem has an inner will, all those things that he wants is for the thing itself. When we say an outer will, Hashem wants it as a means to an end for the benefit that it brings, right? So, for example, the mitzvahs come from Hashem's inner will. Hashem wants you to perform a mitzvah. Hashem also wanted to create the world, but the world comes from Hashem's outer will, because Hashem wants us to use the world to do mitzvahs. So it's a means to an end. So when we say that Hashem created the world conceals conceals godliness, and it's called a hester panim, like a concealment of Hashem's face, whereas the mitzvahs are the panim, the inner will of Hashem. So they're both the will of Hashem to exist. Hashem willed a world, he wanted a world, and he created a world, but different things came from different aspects of his will. So the mitzvahs came from the inner will of Hashem, because Hashem wants the mitzvahs for the mitzvahs itself. Hashem created klipa, for example, and hates klipa, but he created it. But he created klipa as a means to an end. He created the world as a means to an end, so it comes from his outer will. When you do a mitzvah, it is Hashem's will, and it is not restricted to how much the neshama can feel, how much the neshama loves Hashem. Because when you do a mitzvah, the neshama becomes one with Hashem. It doesn't make a difference if the neshama loves Hashem or not. And then the Shekhinah rests upon the person. Now, what does it mean that the Shekhinah rests upon the person? Like, we always use these kind of terminology, but we don't really know what it means. But we do know, now we know that mitzvahs serve as the fuel for the flame of the Shekhinah, right? Shekhinah is another way of saying a revelation of Hashem, of godliness. Beyond the fact that Hashem is everywhere, right? We know that Hashem is everywhere, but this is a greater revelation. How can the truth of Hashem be revealed through doing mitzvahs? Through being incorporated and absorbed into Hashem. Now, what does that mean? The mitzvahs itself become absorbed back into Hashem, very much like the oil feeding the fire now becomes the fire. Let's let that sink in again. So how can the truth of Hashem be revealed through doing mitzvahs? Because when you do mitzvahs, you become incorporated and absorbed into Hashem himself, much like the oil of a wick becomes the fire itself. It becomes absorbed into the fire. When we do a mitzvah, putting our own will aside, we become one with Hashem. That is how we become nullified, incorporated, absorbed into Hashem. Now, what's the difference between feeling and action, right? Because we're discussing now in this chapter more about action and feeling, but we know that feeling is important, right? Love and fear of Hashem is a very important fundamental part of Tanya. So what's the difference? When you feel a feeling, like let's say a person loves Hashem, it can permeate your whole being, right? You love a person, it can completely permeate your whole being. And when a person loves Hashem, he can have a very large quantity of bittul. He can want to become one with Hashem, right? He can desire kedusha. But that feeling alone does not express that there is nothing else besides Hashem, does not express ein od milvado. It's a desire, but it doesn't put it into actuality. The act of the mitzvah means your mind and heart may not even be affected. Ideally, they should be, but it doesn't have to be. They may not be affected. In fact, a person may even feel very separate from Hashem while doing a mitzvah. But you may be feeling one way, but if you do the mitzvah, the act of a mitzvah is a quality bittul, a quality nullification towards Hashem, because now you serve as a dwelling place for Hashem. So that's why we started the class saying the lesson from today's parak is even if you don't feel like it, do it anyways. Now we know, of course, that once you start doing things and the feelings actually develop, right? Sometimes it comes before, but we shouldn't wait for the feelings to develop to do a mitzvah. Sometimes we do it anyways, and then the feelings come. But here, the important thing is to do the mitzvah. So instead of waiting for inspiration to hit and waiting for the feelings to develop, here we learn la'asosai, that it's important to do the mitzvah. The revelation of the Shekhinah can only be in a place that understands that there is nothing else besides Hashem. When we do a mitzvah and we put our own will aside, that's what we are essentially saying. The only thing that exists is Hashem. So you might think that standing on a mountain, looking at an incredible view, let's say, of nature, you might think that that brings you closer to Hashem. Because we do have feelings, right? We say, wow, Marabu Masach Hashem, look at the beauty that Hashem created. So we may think that it brings us closer to Hashem, but actually giving tzedakah, lighting Shabbos candles, putting on tefillin, the action of the mitzvahs are much more powerful. Feelings, however lofty they may even mislead a person because they are not Hashem itself. It's the person, whereas the mitzvah is Hashem itself. So for example, when can feelings trip us up, right? An extreme example, you're keeping Shabbos and you think that in order to enhance the atmosphere of Shabbos, you need to strum on your guitar. That would really give you a lot of feeling towards Hashem. But that's contrary to Hashem's will, right? That's how the whole reform movement started, because they they feel that we've got to feel it, right? Have you ever heard someone say, I'm a Jew at heart, I love Hashem? But if you really love Hashem, you've got to do his mitzvahs. Even if you don't love him this second so much, you've got to be able to love him more than you love yourself. But even if you don't love him, we've still got to do the mitzvahs because that's true love. That's real nullification towards Hashem. The act of a mitzvah reaches higher even than Torah study, which Torah study uses machshava and dibur. We know there are three expressions of the soul through the body, right? Thought, speech, and action. So when we study Torah, we are using thought and speech because we're thinking, we're speaking the words of Torah, right? And it does cause the Shekhinah to rest on the godly soul, because Shekhinah rests on those who study Torah. But action doesn't limit itself to only machshava and dibur, thought and speech. Action needs the body. So the third garment causes the Shekhinah to rest even on the animal soul, not only the godly soul. The body now becomes one with Hashem, in addition to the soul, right? And at that moment, even though it's not complete like a tzaddik, but when we do a mitzvah at that specific moment, the animal soul is transformed. Not only as is the animal soul at this moment not preventing you from doing a mitzvah, which it usually tries to do, but it is actually doing the mitzvah. So interestingly enough, that when you do a mitzvah, you could influence the animal soul in three ways. The divine soul can either subdue the animal soul. So in other words, you'll do the mitzvah in spite of the animal soul. That's one way. The second way that the divine soul affects the animal soul is that it prevails on the animal soul's emotion. So the animal soul willingly steps aside. It's not like kicking and screaming and saying, don't do the mitzvah. And despite that, you do the mitzvah. They say, okay, it might be good for me. Okay, I'll let you do the mitzvah, right? So the divine soul prevails upon the animal soul. It's like when we give an animal a treat, the animal thinks, oh, great, this is great. I'm going to continue doing this, right? And the third level is when the animal soul actually agrees to do the mitzvah, because we need the animal soul to do the mitzvah. We need the cooperation of the animal soul to do the mitzvah. So at the time of a mitzvah action, the animal soul either goes against its nature or it's ignored totally. But nonetheless, it becomes absorbed in Hashem's oneness and causes the Shekhinah to be revealed in a way that surrounds us. That's why it's on top of us, not in us, right? Because doing a mitzvah, which is Hashem's will, does not involve tzimtzum, like all other creations came down to this world through various contractions and concealments of Hashem's will. A mitzvah is purely Hashem's will, and it is the purpose of the Beinoni, or us who want to become a Beinoni, to be a host and create a dwelling place for Hashem, which we spoke about last chapter, and that's how we do it, by actually doing the action of the mitzvah. Now, later on, the Alter Rebbe speaks about kavana and feelings and all that, but right now, this parak is all about doing. So the lesson in this chapter is not to be discouraged by the animal soul, because the animal soul can achieve even what the divine soul cannot, which is to unify you with Hashem and to let the Shekhinah rest upon your head. Okay, anyone have anything to say?
Can you give more examples, please?
You don't want to daven, and you daven anyways. You don't want to give tzedakah, you give tzedakah anyways.
Yeah, but this is like mitzvahs, but does it?
Well, that's a mitzvah, exactly.
Okay. What about on a more like feelings level? Like you don't.
So we're not talking about feelings now. We're talking about mitzvahs. You're talking about like, oh, what if you really hate somebody and you should like them anyways? Is that what you're asking?
I
Or you
mean,
really
yeah, or do something for them anyways. Like,
yeah. So
you know,
sometimes, well, you have to ask yourself if it's the right thing or not, right? Not, sometimes it's not a mitzvah. The mitzvah is to love the person. That's the actual mitzvah. But yeah, sometimes you don't like them and you do them a favor anyways, and you're doing it anyway. So yes, then you have the Shekhinah resting on you because you're becoming one with Hashem. You don't wait for the person to deserve your favor.
okay, but how do you feel, how do you call it, doing the right thing versus feeling resentful because you think you don't like what they're doing or what
So feeling resentful is a different issue. In other words, feeling resentful and then you're transforming your feelings, that's in the realm of feelings. Now that has to be done, and it actually achieves a dwelling place for Hashem down below, because resentment and anger and fear and all these lovely negative emotions come from the animal soul. So we do have to overcome the feelings of the animal soul. And when we overcome the feelings of the animal soul, we're creating a dira for Hashem, batachtoinim, because the animal soul comes from the lower regions, right? The lower spheres. So when you've overcome that emotion and you've transformed it into a positive emotion, which we can speak about, you've made a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. But this is not what this chapter is talking about. This chapter is talking about actions. Hamaisa hu ha'ikar. So, like for example, when the Rebbe came out with the Tefillin campaign, take an example, right? There were many people against that campaign because they said, "What do you mean? Like the person doesn't even know what Hashem is. The person doesn't even know what Tefillin is. The person's going to do a mitzvah. Like, what does that mean? First, we have to teach the people about Hashem. Then we have to teach them what Tefillin is, and then one day they'll do Tefillin, right? They'll put on Tefillin." And the Rebbe was against that. He said, no. Let's first do the action, because when you do the action, that's when your body is in accordance with Hashem's will. In other words, you're nullified towards Hashem's will. It is Hashem's will, right? Is it Hashem's will that you should feel warm and fuzzy about putting on tefillin? Of course, you should love Hashem and want to put on tefillin. But really, the main point is to transform your body into a vehicle that serves Hashem. So that's called putting on tefillin, giving tzedakah, benching licht, all the other mitzvahs, eating kosher, all the things that we do on a daily basis, right? We don't have to wait for the feelings to come to do those mitzvahs.
okay. Does this also apply to the diet?
Of course. Of course. It's a little more complex, right? But it's the Ma'asim Tovim. So the Alter Rebbe speaks about here mitzvahs and Ma'asim Tovim. So Ma'asim Tovim are the good deeds. What are good deeds as opposed to mitzvahs, right? The Alter Rebbe spent 20 years deliberating on one word or one letter. So why did he say mitzvahs and Ma'asim Tovim? So the
Right.
good deeds are everything you do to serve Hashem, right? So yes, when you choose to eat a healthy breakfast instead of a Danish and orange juice, then you served Hashem, yes. Then you are one with Hashem as well, because Hashem wants you to have a healthy body, 100%. And you don't have to feel it. You could just do it anyways. Yeah.
I feel the Danish.
Talking to myself,
I
yeah.
feel the Danish, Hannah.
You feel what?
The Danish, I feel. Not the healthy breakfast. I understand. Okay.
Everything we do to overcome our Yetzer Hara, overcome our animal soul, that means making a dira for Hashem in this world.
Hmm.
But the point of this chapter is that if you want to reveal the Shekhinah in your life, you want to unite with Hashem, do mitzvahs, even if you don't feel it quite yet, right? Obviously, we have to feel it. The whole of Tanya is talking about developing a love and fear of Hashem, and if you don't even feel a complete love, at least a tefuna. We spoke about all these things, right? But do the mitzvah anyways, right?
Let me ask you a question. I sometimes people like Baal Teshuvas, they take a lot upon themselves to do, more than they can carry. And this is what they say. How do you
So that's a different story. They have to speak to a mashpia, a rav, because sometimes the Yetzer Hara dresses up as a tzaddik. It says, do
Okay.
more, do more, do more, do more. So you've got to know, you have to know the derech. Like each, that's very personalized. Some people can take on a million mitzvahs at one time. Some people became frum overnight, and some people can need to
Grad-
do it gradually. But that's very individual.
So I understand that, but if you're saying doing a mitzvah, even if you don't want to, this is a big accomplishment. How does this fall with what you just said?
That's a good question. That's a good question, but I think that there has to be there has to be integration. In other words, it has to be, yes, of course, they have to know that the destination is to do all the mitzvahs. Person has to know, but if they take on everything at one time, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to understand how if I came to your class first time, this class, and you're telling me
Okay.
you have to do mitzvahs even if you don't want to do them, I would feel like, okay, I know
So
there's a
I would say, so if a person like that would come to my class, and if a person like that is listening to my recording, for example, I would say, choose one or two mitzvahs that you've had a hard time doing and just do them for some time. That then becomes your comfort zone. Once that becomes your comfort zone, then go on to the next one. Don't stop. Don't wait until you feel it before you try any mitzvahs. In other words, choose one or two that you don't necessarily feel and do them.
Shalamas, may I just say, as a Baal Tshuva, at the beginning, I faced exactly, I'll say, that dilemma. We moved very, very slowly, but there were times when I felt honestly false, like I'm faking it. I'm not sure I'm into this. I don't get the meaning behind it. I'm going through the motions. Um, but if I hadn't continued to, I wouldn't be where Baruch Hashem I am today. So I was willing to sort of hand over, I'm going to say like control to my Rebbitzin, who really kind of took me by the hand and helped me to understand that the feeling and the understanding would come if I continued doing.
you have a
And
very Rebbitzin.
it was hard for me. It was it was hard for me to feel fake, like I was going through the motions.
Mhm.
It was a huge decision, a difficult decision in a way, for which I'm very grateful that that I'm on the path I'm on now.
Mhm.
Does that help you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For that, you have to have a Rebbitzin who cares.
Very much so.
Many Balchuvas don't have somebody helping them. They're just on their own, especially when they become frum or that what looks like frum.
Yes.
Um, I know people, they live in a community and the Chabad there is working with not frum people. So they were like nowhere. Nobody was helping them to grow and they felt abandoned.
Yeah, my family, we could not have done this without that guidance.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody needs a guide. That's fundamental.
Yeah.
It's not just about tshuva, it's just an example. Everybody needs a guide.
Right.
Yes.
And by the way, Sina made a comment that she feels like that 24 years later. And guess what? I feel like that being born from.
Uh-huh.
There are sometimes things that I'm like, well, why do I need to do this?
That's why we have a maspiach, right?
Right.
Right. Mashpia for sure. And
Maspiach.
also you learn this parak of Tanya. Sometimes you do it even if you don't feel exactly like doing it, you know?
Mhm.
Well, Matt, I too am a relative. I don't know if you're speaking about yourself, but I too am a relatively new about Teshuvah since COVID. I really became front. And it's a challenge, and I don't have a Rebbitzin here either. But I constantly seek out women who I can connect to on my path who are going to take me to another step. And I think your honesty is so beautiful because this is what Hashem wants. He wants the real you. He doesn't want a false version of you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't you think that, Lucy, is
So I like what you said, Andrea, and I also think that sometimes that can trip a person up. So you've got to be careful because when a person says Hashem wants the real me, he doesn't want the false me, right? So that mindset might actually hold a person back from doing more mitzvahs.
okay? I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the honesty and the struggle is real.
Okay, yeah, the struggle is real, and we're going to go on and learn more about the struggle.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that when we don't feel it, we're doing something false. And I think that I'm so happy you actually brought this up because I think that that is the lesson in this parak of Tanya. You may think, oh, I'm such a hypocrite. I'm false. This is not the real me. Hashem wants the real me. The real you is your godly soul who wants you to act in accordance with Hashem's will. It is not, your animal soul is not the real you. Might be your personality, and it's definitely it's definitely the part of you that trips you up. The real you is doing mitzvahs, even if you don't feel it quite, but knowing that eventually you will come to feel it, and learning more about Hashem creates the feeling, right? So whoever learns Tanya, and let's shout it from the rooftops, let's all learn Tanya, you learn more about Hashem. You learn more about how to love and fear Hashem. And that's the point. But don't let it hold you back from doing the mitzvahs if you feel like your love and fear of Hashem is not yet complete. And that's the point. It's not false to do the mitzvahs even though you don't feel it yet. Yet. I don't know. Whoever saw my status yesterday, I wrote about the word yet, right?
Hannah, could you this chapter, I think, really it does set the stage, quote unquote, for everything. And that relationship between the animal soul, the godly soul, but you also mentioned there was something in between that was doing I'm a little confused. There's the Shekhinah is above you. I think
Yeah, so we're talking about the Shekhinah, like the Alter Rebbe brings the Shekhinah to explain how a person maintains the presence of Hashem around him. The Shekhinah is like a revelation of Hashem which surrounds you. It's not in you. That's a topic for a different day, but it surrounds you. It may be protecting you. It may be keeping you in connection with your with Hashem, really. It's really connecting you with Hashem. That's what it's doing. And the Shekhinah is the flame of the candle, so to speak. The body is the wick, but the mitzvahs is the oil. And it's the oil that imagine a wick would burn without oil. The flame would you would have a flame, but it wouldn't last a long time, right? You could light a string, a wick, or whatever it is. It will burn. It will be a little bit of a black smoke because it was going to finish, right? It's not going to be a pure, beautiful flame. And the Alter Rebbe actually says that in this chapter. But if we add oil, the oil maintains that flame alive and vibrant, right? So the whole point of here, why action is so important, is because action is the oil. And the question over here is, hey, 1 second, why is action, which was with our coarse body, why is that the oil for the Shekhinah as opposed to the Neshama? Shouldn't the Neshama be the oil keeping the Shekhinah alive? Well, guess what? No, because the Neshama is not as high as a mitzvah.
That's amazing.
A mitzvah is higher than a neshama. Yes, action equals oil.
The Shekhinah is the flame, the body is the wick.
The
And
body
it's
is the wick, the Shekhinah is the flame, and the mitzvah is the oil,
okay, thank
which
you.
which connects the flame to the body.
Mhm.
So if we want to be connected to Hashem, it's all about doing mitzvahs, actions.
Right. Otherwise, you're just like, I'm a spiritual person. Right.
Yeah, you could go stand on the Himalayan mountains and
right.
say, "Oh, I feel so one with Hashem," but really, you're not because you didn't do a mitzvah. So you're feeling good at that moment, but what does that feeling help you? It's not maintaining the Shekhinah above your head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about you and not Hashem, right? We like to feel good. We pursue comfort and pleasure and good feelings, and mitzvahs should feel good. I'm not saying that, because if the nefesh habahamis, if the animal soul never feels good, it's not going to be very sustainable. It's not going to want to help you do the mitzvahs, right? So, feelings are good, but we shouldn't wait for our feelings to do the mitzvah, because doing is more important.
This is
Yeah.
so enlightening. Pardon the
Yeah.
pun. I didn't mean it, but I guess it really is the essence of the word enlightening now that I think of it. I mean, it's bringing light and understanding, and this is just,
That
thank
is
you.
why, by the way, it's a very appropriate chapter to be learning this week in honor of Gimel Tammuz, because the Rebbe was all about action.
Mm.
Action. Do one more mitzvah.
Right.
Do a mitzvah. Right? The Rebbe was all about light Shabbos candles, put on tefillin, keep Taras Mishpacha. You don't have to feel it to do it. Just do it. And your neshama will catch up. Your feeling will catch up.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
actually had a very interesting story, because when a few years ago, I got a phone call from a neighbor in my building that there was a group of Brazilian boys and girls, I think. They had gone on a trip to Israel. There were no direct flights, and they they were going via South Africa. And for some reason, their plane was delayed in South Africa, and they were stuck in South Africa. And could I help? Right? Because I'm from South Africa. So sure, I called up my mother at the time, and I was like, okay, what can we do with this group of teenagers stuck in the airport? So she contacted my cousin, who arranged a van to go pick them up, and he brought them all to his house and gave them lunch. And now these kids had just spent 2 weeks in Israel. And actually, it was with a frum organization. And when they came to my cousin's house, he said to them, okay, have any of you put on tefillin today? Would you like to put on tefillin? None of them in the 2 weeks or 10 days or however long they were in Israel had put on tefillin. And that trip, they all put on tefillin. And he said to the rabbi who was accompanying them, he said, I'm not understanding something. You took these kids to Israel, but they never put on tefillin? He was like, no, because first, I'm not going to force them. First, they have to understand Judaism, and they have to want to do it. And Chabad is all about, the Rebbe is like all about what? And just in that moment, all of these kids put on tefillin, and they were all so excited and happy. And maybe that's why they had to be delayed in South Africa to come to Brazil, right? Because if they wouldn't have come, they would have spent 2 weeks in Israel learning about Yiddishkeit and not doing the mitzvahs.
Right. I have
Right.
plenty. I have plenty of like people coming to me. They went through yeshiva system here in New York, and they don't know anything. They don't know basic things. I don't know how it happened. Expensive school, very expensive. One of the best.
Basic things you're talking about doing, about that they
Doing,
have to do.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
doing like Nagelwasser. Like what?
right. So it's all about doing. It's really, again, no negating feelings. We've got to learn about Yiddishkeit, and we have to learn about loving and fearing Hashem, and feelings are good and important, but first comes the action.
Don, I have to give a shameless plug for Sina. Yes, I do. Because
Yeah.
if anybody I've ever met in my life, Sina embodies that, Baruch Hashem. She embodies action more than anybody I know. She's
I love it.
such an incredible person.
Beautiful.
I'm giving
Amen.
Sina.
Just say thank you,
I'm
Sina.
gonna ground that. Baruch Hashem.
They can't speak. She's on the chat.
It's the MS. That's the MS.
Beautiful.
Baruch Hashem.
I think we all struggle with it in some way or form. Like we struggle. Oh, I don't feel like doing this now, but do it anyways, right? And this is what it's all about. It's being connected to our source, Hashem.
One time I was complaining to a friend of mine who is a teacher in one of the Lubavitch schools, and I was complaining that I give classes to my ladies here, and I'm not motivated, and I feel not appreciated. And she said, one thing you have to do is to love what you're doing. So instead of teaching them stuff you don't want to teach, maybe switch the topic or switch the way you teach, but that's the only way to get them
So
to
that's
do.
a solution. So that's a solution for teaching. And I love teaching Tanya, which is why I teach Tanya. But it's not a solution. It's again not a solution for doing the mitzvahs. Because if we're going to wait to love all the mitzvahs, we're not going to love to do all the mitzvahs. But if we do them anyways, that's because we're doing the mitzvahs on Hashem's terms and Hamaisahu Eikar. So in your story, the example would be teach anyways, even if you don't feel like it. Yes, try and make it easy, like find a good topic or whatever it is, but do it anyways. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna also, what Sina said in the text, Chana Rachel Schusterman is teaching classes in Chushim, and this week is an action Shulamit. If you have the desire, we can send you the link, Chana, if you don't mind, because it
Sure.
is such an amazing, it's an amazing class, but this really lines up with this week perfectly.
Is it on Zoom? They should do it on Zoom?
Yeah, it's on Zoom.
Okay. Oh, for sure. Post the link.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies. So this was a very thought-provoking class.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Take care. We'll see everyone next week. Mitzvah Shem.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everybody. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Amazing Farbringen.
I'm for
Yeah.
bringing. It's for bringing. Yep. Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.